Would Raye have won her first Grammy if she'd stayed trapped in her record deal? Hello, and welcome to Whose Song Is It Anyway? Hosted by me, creative industries legal expert Dr Hayleigh Bosher. I'll be your guide to the big legal questions shaping the music and creative industries right now. Think of this as your weekly dose of all things copyright, ownership, and intellectual property. With each episode unpacking real-life case studies to break down the complex legal issues at the heart of the music and creative industries. From viral sampling disputes to everything AI, copyright battles, and crucially, how to get paid. I promise you this, no jargon and no gatekeeping. Just real insights into how it all works and the kind of practical advice that might just prove invaluable if you're a creative in this space. In today's episode, we're going to ask, what is copyright and what does it actually do? Who owns it and how can we actually use it? And why should we actually even care about copyright? But first, story time. So when Raye was just 17, she signed a 4-album deal with Polydor Records. That was in around 2014, off the back of a success that she'd had with her self-release EP called Welcome to Winter. She signed the contract. She would have been really excited to get her first record deal, I'm sure. But what she didn't know at the time was that she was giving away all her power to decide what music she was releasing. When the label head who signed her left the Polydor in 2016, Raye ultimately became less of a priority. And at the same time, they kind of repositioned her not as a long-term recording artist, but more as a featured vocalist. So you can go back and see that Raye is featured on loads of different records as a singer, but she's not at that time able to release any of her own music that she's writing and the kind of stuff that we're seeing from her now. In 2021, Raye tweeted that she wasn't allowed to put out one album. So she's on a 4-album contract, but she hasn't been able to put out even one album at this point, which means she's trapped in this contract and not able to meet the requirements of what it's asking her to release and therefore move forward. She said, "All I care about is the music. I'm sick of being slept on and I'm sick of being in pain about this. It's not business to me. It's so personal." And I hear this a lot from creators and artists that I work with, that copyright and the industry and the business side of things, that's not really why we're in it. We do need to know what those things are, but ultimately it's meaningful to them because their ability to express themselves and make their creative art, whatever that is, whether that's they're an artist and they're producing music, or they're a writer and it's a book, or a director and a film, they are the kind of people who feel the need to create and express. And being trapped in a contract that you were so hopeful was going to enable you to do that, and then it holds you back, must have been really, really hard for Raye. But she didn't just stay there. She pushed back on a power imbalance in the music industry that we're going to talk about in more detail in later episodes. But we know that as a mixed race woman, she would have faced higher barriers to entry, and she would have had a difficult time just even getting to that contract, let alone pushing through, managing to renegotiate her way out of that contract, and then go on to be the Raye that we now see, who's won 7 Brit Awards, 4 Global Awards, 2 Ivors Academy Awards, and a Grammy. So she's done amazing. And honestly, I think the people working at Polydor who did sleep on her are probably regretting their decisions right now. Record deals can be amazing. Some artists obviously thrive on their record deal, but it has to be the right deal for you, and you have to be aware of what you're getting yourself into, and understanding your rights and knowing what you're signing is part of that process. What Raye did to overcome that contract and now become this hugely successful artist that we're seeing is actually against the odds, because not only is she going to face higher barriers as a mixed race woman in the music industry, but also we know that 16.7% of songwriters receiving royalties are women. Only 16.7. We know that only 20% of signed artists are women. women make less money on average, and Black women are the most disadvantaged in the music industry, earning 25% less than white women and 46% less than men, according to a Black Lives in Music report in 2022. I think that we need to acknowledge this journey that she's been on and this incredible success that she has now achieved. But we can also learn from her journey. And it's not just Raye. We see this with other artists as well. For example, Chloe Howell, she signed to Columbia when she was just 16. And she now says that she wishes that she'd stuck up for herself more and had been more able to advocate for herself, which she is now doing. She's now releasing through an indie label, and she says she's more able to express herself in a natural and genuine, authentic way. So that's amazing that she's come through that. But here in this podcast, we're here to learn from these stories, and we're here to learn about our rights so that we can make informed decisions. Signing a record deal can be amazing if it's the right deal for you, but you also have to be aware that things might change at the record label during your time of being there. So some of the reasons why an artist might be sidelined in a label could be because of changing commercial expectations, a reluctance to finance an album campaign, all because the person that signed the artist no longer works for that company anymore. And so the artist isn't necessarily a priority for a different person that they're directly communicating with, or maybe they don't have a direct communication anymore. So there's this thing in contracts called a key man clause. I like to call it a key person clause for obvious reasons. But what that means is that if the person leaves that you have signed with, then that's a get out for you in the contract, or at least it will be renegotiated. It gives you that little bit of power so you're not lost if the person that you're working with in that label decides to move on and go elsewhere. So something to bear in mind. So what is copyright and what does it actually do? Copyright is basically a set of legal rules that says if you create something like a song, a film, or a book, you get a right to say what happens to that thing. So it gives you control over it. Ideally, it gives you a way to make money from that thing. So copyright is situated in the law under something called intellectual property rights. So intellectual property rights is just an umbrella term that means all the different ways that the law protects creativity and innovation. And there's different types of intellectual property, like trademark, which we'll talk about in a different episode, patents, which protects invention, designs, protects the aesthetics of what a product looks like. So I'm just letting you know these different types of IP so you can distinguish between them. Copyright's the one that is most important to you if you're creating works that fall under this type of protection. So that might be a film, a book, a song, a painting, photograph, a sculpture. These are the kind of things that copyright protects. Once you have copyright, it basically says that you can say who can copy your work or not, hence the copyright, the right to copy. If you create something that's copyright protectable, then actually the protection arises automatically. You don't need to register it in the same way that you might register a trademark or a patent, for example. If you're in the US or certain other countries, you do need to register the right if you want to enforce it, but you don't need to register the right for it to exist in the first place. Now, in music, there are two different copyrights that are very important to understand. And I'm going to talk about this in almost every episode it comes up, because that's how relevant it is for you to know the difference between these two rights. Okay, so there's the musical copyright, which applies to the song or the musical composition. In the industry, people sometimes refer to this as publishing, because if you have a publishing deal, then this is the copyright that you would be licensing or assigning to the publisher. Okay? Then there's a second copyright, which is in the sound recording. So that's literally the physical recording of the song. In copyright, we call it sound recording. In the music industry, it's often referred to as the master. I prefer not to use that language, so I'll be calling it a sound recording the majority of the time, unless it gets really confusing. Sometimes you do need another word to indicate what it is that you're talking about. So in the industry, when you make a song, Obviously, you might have lots of different little tracks. So you might have the vocals on one track and the guitar and the drums on different tracks. If you're like in the studio, the master typically refers to the final recording that is the one that has been mixed and is then sent out to the radio and is put on a CD and streamed, okay? So when I say sound recording, that's the one I mean, the final recording. So you have a copyright protection in the musical work and you have copyright protection in the sound recording. They are often owned by different people if you're working with lots of different third parties. So for example, if you have a publishing deal, you would license the musical work to the publisher. If you have a record deal, it's the recording company that often owns the sound recording. If you are an independent artist, you own both these rights if you're doing all of these things for yourself. Copyright typically lasts 70 years after the death of the creator, and that applies to the musical work. For the sound recording, because it's sometimes owned by a company, it wouldn't make sense, right, for it to be 70 years after the death of the creator, because it might be owned by a company and the company might not die. So it's 70 years after the release of the sound recording. Just me interrupting myself to let you know that if you're looking for a guide to navigating the world of copyright in music and the creative industries, you can pick up the new edition of my book, Copyright in the Music Industry. In it, I share everything you need to know about copyright, intellectual property, and more on navigating the world of AI. And I go into much further detail about the topics I've spoken about today. It's straightforward, digestible, and most importantly, will empower you to make the right moves to protect your own work. I'll leave the link in the episode description for you to pick up your copy. So who owns it, and how can we use it as a tool? The first owner of the copyright is the creator. So if you make something, initially the copyright is yours, unless you make it in the course of employment. So what that means is if you are employed full-time, for example, by a studio, then you need to check your contract to see, but it may be that actually everything that you write belongs to the studio. For me, for example, in my academic day job, it could be that the copyright in the slides and the talks that I do for Brunel actually is owned by them. So that would be the starting point of the law. But everything in copyright is governed by contract. And actually, in my employment contract, there's a policy that says, lucky me, I get to keep the copyright in my creative works. But there is an agreement that the university can use it as part of like their promotion. So that seems reasonable. But if you work for a company, often it makes more sense that they don't have to keep asking you for permission to use the work as an employee. So it's something to be aware of. It's the other way around, actually, if you're working as a freelancer. That's the starting position of the law. But like anything, it's governed by contract, so you need to check the terms of your contract, okay? So the first owner of the copyright is the creator, if it's not made in the course of employment. You can then transfer that ownership through a license or an assignment, which I'll explain what those two different words mean in just a second. And it might be that you transfer the ownership to a record label, to a publisher, or to a collecting society or a distributor, if you're in the music industry. If you're an author, you might license the use of your book to a publisher who then publishes the book and puts it on the shelf for you. It doesn't matter what type of copyright creative work we're talking about, the process is the same. So the difference between a license and assignment is a license is like, it's mine, I own it, but I let you use it for a specific purpose for a specific period of time. And usually with that kind of deal, I'll be getting royalty payments, a share of all of the profit that you make, the person that I have licensed it to, okay? But ultimately it's still mine. And usually the license ends at a certain point and then you can relicense or not. You can have an exclusive license, which means I can only license it to this one person or company, or you can have a non-exclusive license, which means I can license it to lots of different people. An assignment is like a sale. So I sell my copyright to someone through an assignment, which means they now own it and I don't have any rights in it anymore. So it's really important to know the difference between those two words because it's vastly different. The ownership changes hands with an assignment. Usually, if you are assigning your copyright, you get an upfront payment and you don't see any royalties because you don't have any ownership in that particular thing anymore. Okay? So in the music industry, you often see if there is a publishing deal, then it is the musical work that is licensed to the publisher and also a collecting society, and the sound recording often owned by the record label, and then also you might have a collecting society for that right as well. Why should we even care about copyright? I think the fact that you're here, if you're listening to this already, maybe you already have some ideas, and obviously you do care to a certain extent. Maybe I'm preaching to the converted, but let me just get you riled up for the rest of the season and feel good about the fact that you're here and you're learning about your rights. So why should we care? Personally, I think that we need to understand our rights because knowledge is power. And especially in the creative industries, I feel like if you don't understand your rights and what you're entitled to, you can be taken advantage of. And when you do understand your rights, you can maximize the benefit of those. So it's a win-win if you can avoid being taken advantage of and you can maximize the benefits of your rights. And the benefits might be control, deciding when your work is used and where, and it might be remuneration, like how and when you're paid. I think that historically speaking, creators and musicians, artists and songwriters have not fully been educated about their rights. And that's because they've just been focusing on their creative craft. And I completely respect and understand that. But I do think there's a shift now towards being more entrepreneurial and really taking more responsibility for understanding the admin and the business side of the industry if you want to be successful. One thing I would say is think about who benefits from you not knowing, from not understanding your rights and how to use them and how to enforce them. I think that if we can collectively boost our knowledge and understanding and confidence around how we manage our rights as creators, then we're going to be in a stronger position. I know from working with creators, musicians and artists and songwriters that often people can think of copyright as a barrier. But what I really want to help you to understand is that copyright can work for you. And ultimately, the point in the law, the point in copyright is that it is a right for creators. It's yours. It protects you if you know how to use it. And that's what we're here to learn. Often in reality, though, it can be that we sign away those rights before we even realize what they do and what we've done. So don't panic if you have already signed contracts or worked with people and you didn't do a contract, all the things that we're going to discuss this season, because it's always about moving forward and improving your knowledge and doing better next time and maybe learning from those experiences. The other reason why I think that we should care about copyright is, yes, to understand for our own benefit and to manage our own rights, but also I think that it's important to understand that law is not this thing that is just outside of us and it's imposed on us and we don't have a say. Actually, copyright law, like any law, is just human-made. We just collectively decided this is what the law was going to be and we can change it. It is changeable and it does change all of the time. In fact, the current copyright law, the Copyright Designs and Patents Act 1988, has been updated over 100 times. So it changes all of the time. And I think that we should understand copyright and our rights around how to manage it also so that we can be involved in the lawmaking process to help make those laws more fair, effective, and appropriate. So what I mean by that is getting engaged in the policy and the process of law, not just being at the effect of the law and managing our way through what the law says. It's also questioning it and thinking about it critically and thinking, is this law effective? Is it fair? Is it efficient? Or should we be lobbying the government or thinking about joining a collective organization to move towards a change that would benefit everyone? I think that we can and we should engage in the lawmaking process. You're learning about copyright so that you can make more informed decisions and you can be confident when you're having conversations about managing your rights. But also you're thinking critically about the law and you're thinking about, is it fair and effective? Do we need to be engaging in policy debates about what the law actually says? And does it need updating? Does it need changing? Okay, so welcome to season 4. I'm really happy to be back and I hope that you are too. I just want to shout out to the British Academy. So I was doing a funded innovation fellowship through the British Academy in the last couple of years. And part of that money has gone towards making this better than it has ever been. So thank you to the British Academy. I'm really happy you're here. I really hope you enjoyed this season. I'm going to be covering the basics, so understanding all about your copyright, managing your rights, making informed decisions, how to protect yourself, how to benefit from those rights. But also we're going to have conversations around power and control in the music industry and the creative industries more broadly. And we're also going to cover the current and future developments in the creative and music industries, such as everything to do with AI, of course. After listening to this season, I hope that you'll know more about your rights and how to manage them, how the music industry works, and the current policy debates around changing these rights and rules that we are learning about. So today we've covered what is copyright and what does it actually do, who owns it and how can we use it, and why should we actually care. So remember, don't sign a contract before you know what you're getting yourself into. Okay, so that's it for today. Thanks for listening. Follow Whose Song Is It Anyway on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts for more. And I'll keep on breaking it all down for you. In the meantime, you can grab a copy of my book, Copyright in the Music Industry, your go-to practical guide for navigating copyright and IP with clarity and confidence. I've linked to it in the show notes for you. See you in the next episode.